Daniel Mercer, a wealthy American businessman, and Ananya Sharma, a young Indian woman living in Dubai, were bound by an online romance that promised love and escape. But when Rafiq, the man from Ananya's past, discovered their secret, the affair spiraled into a brutal hotel bloodbath that shocked the world. Daniel Mercer lived a life many envied, yet it was one filled with silence once the workday ended. He was a wealthy American businessman who had built his fortune through years of smart investments and relentless ambition. His name carried weight in New York boardrooms, and his portfolio included ventures stretching from Europe to the Middle East. Dubai was one of his frequent destinations, a place where luxury and business intertwined seamlessly. The city's gleaming towers and lavish hotels offered the perfect backdrop for his deals. And in many ways, he felt at home among its wealth and sophistication. But despite the glamour, Daniel's personal life was hollow. His marriage had collapsed years earlier, leaving him estranged from his family. His days were consumed by meetings and his nights by empty hotel rooms that overlooked skylines he admired alone. It was during these long, solitary nights that Daniel turned to the internet, seeking connection beyond contracts and deals. What began as casual browsing soon became a routine, and eventually it led him to Ananya Sharma, an Indian woman living in Dubai. She was younger, elegant, and carried herself with confidence. Her photos showed her exploring the city's fashionable districts, sipping coffee at high-end cafes, and posing at landmarks that reflected sophistication. Her messages were warm, affectionate, and carefully written. For Daniel, who had long craved genuine companionship, she was a breath of fresh air. Their conversations grew quickly from polite exchanges to confessions of loneliness and dreams of the future. Ananya seemed to understand him in a way no one else did. She listened to his frustrations, encouraged his ambitions, and offered comfort during his bouts of emptiness. Her charm was effortless, her attention unwavering. Soon, the thought of Ananya became a constant presence in his mind. He found himself checking his phone in the middle of meetings, waiting for her messages, and imagining what it would be like to sit across from her rather than from a screen. Daniel had always been cautious in business, but in matters of the heart, his judgment was clouded. He ignored the nagging thought that everything was moving too fast. He told himself he deserved this happiness, that fate had finally rewarded him after years of emptiness. Ananya seemed equally invested, sending him photos throughout the day, sharing details of her routines, and hinting at her hopes for a future that included stability and security. What Daniel could not see behind the screen was the complexity of Ananya's life. While she presented herself as free and independent, she carried secrets that would eventually collide with his own world. She had debts, personal entanglements, and a history that did not align with the innocent image she projected. Yet for Daniel, none of that mattered. He was a man starved for connection, and Ananya was the answer to every longing he had suppressed for years. By the time he booked his next trip to Dubai, it was no longer about business. This time, it was about love, or at least the promise of it. He was determined to meet her in person, unaware that this decision would lead him down a path from which there would be no return. Daniel arrived in Dubai with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. He had traveled to the city countless times before, but this visit was different. His suitcase was not only filled with business suits and contracts, but also with carefully chosen gifts for expensive perfumes, designer jewelry, and a silk scarf he had picked out personally in New York called tokens of affection meant to show her how serious he was about their relationship. He booked himself into one of the most exclusive hotels in downtown Dubai, overlooking the glittering skyline. This time, his focus was not on meetings or profits, but on the woman who had filled the empty spaces in his life with hope. When Ananya finally walked into the hotel lobby, Daniel felt his breath catch. She was more striking than the photos he had seen online. Dressed in a flowing dress, with her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, she moved with an elegance that turned heads. For Daniel, it was confirmation that everything he had imagined about her was real. She greeted him with warmth and familiarity, as though they had known each other for years, not just through screens. The connection they had built online immediately translated into reality, and Daniel was swept away by the feeling that fate had brought them together. Over the next few days, their time together felt like a whirlwind. They dined at high-end restaurants, visited shopping malls where Daniel insisted on buying her anything she desired, and took long drives along the coast in the privacy of the hotel suite. They shared moments of closeness that deepened his conviction that this was more than an affair, it was the beginning of a new life. He began speaking of possibilities of moving her to the United States, of giving her stability and security. Every gesture he made was designed to show her he was serious, that she was not just another fleeting connection, but someone he intended to build a future with. Ananya, however, carried a different weight on her shoulders. While she smiled and accepted his affection, her mind was never fully at ease. Beneath her polished charm, she was entangled in a complicated personal life that she had carefully hidden from Daniel. She had debts that haunted her and connections she could not easily escape. Among them was Rafiq, a man whose influence stretched into Dubai's darker corners. He was controlling, possessive, and unpredictable. Though their relationship had soured, his shadow still loomed over her every move. Meeting Daniel gave her a glimpse of freedom, but it also placed her in greater danger. Each time she returned Daniel's gaze, she felt a pang of guilt mixed with fear. She knew Rafiq would never accept another man in her life, especially not one who flaunted wealth and generosity in such a public way. Yet the lure of Daniel's promises was too strong. She wanted to believe she could start fresh, that the path he offered could save her from the chains of her past. What she didn't realize was that every step closer she took to Daniel pushed her further into a deadly trap, one that neither of them could escape once Rafiq discovered the truth. Rafiq was not a man who overlooked details. His life revolved around control, and nothing slipped past his watchful eyes. For weeks, he had sensed that Ananya was drifting away from him. The late replies to his messages, the vague excuses about where she was spending her evenings, and the way she avoided his calls all pointed to one conclusion. Rafiq had always considered her his possession, someone who owed him loyalty after all the ways he had supported her in the past. When whispers reached him about her being seen with a foreign man in Dubai's upscale districts, his suspicions hardened into certainty. It did not take long for him to find out who Daniel Mercer was. Rafiq had contacts who could dig into anyone's background, and Daniel's prominence made the task easier. He learned that Daniel was a wealthy American businessman, staying in one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. Photos captured of the pair at a restaurant and a shopping mall fueled his rage. To Rafiq, this was not just betrayal, it was humiliation. Ananya was parading around with another man. And worse, a foreigner flaunting his money as though he could buy what Rafiq believed belonged to him. Rafiq's jealousy grew into obsession. He began following Ananya from a distance, keeping track of her movements with Daniel. Every gift Daniel handed her, every smile she returned, and every embrace he caught glimpses of only pushed him further toward violence. In his mind, Ananya had betrayed him in the most unforgivable way, and Daniel had insulted his pride by stepping into his world without fear. He started planning not just to confront them, but to make an example out of the betrayal. Meanwhile, Daniel remained blissfully unaware of the storm building around him. He was intoxicated by Ananya's presence and the belief that she was the woman he had been searching for. His trust in her was absolute. He shared details about his life, his business, and even hinted at the possibility of transferring part of his operations to Dubai if it meant being closer to her. He had no idea that Rafiq's eyes were on him, watching his every move. Ananya, however, could feel the tension closing in. Rafiq's calls became more aggressive, his messages filled with veiled threats and accusations. She tried to hide her fear from Daniel, masking it with smiles and reassurances. But inside, she knew it was only a matter of time before Rafiq confronted them. She wanted to believe Daniel could protect her. Yet she also understood that Rafiq's anger was not something to be underestimated. His influence in Dubai went beyond what Daniel could comprehend, and his temper was capable of erupting into violence without warning. The city that had once felt glamorous and full of promise now became a stage for looming danger. Ananya found herself caught between two men. One who offered her love and escape, and another who promised only destruction if she dared to leave him. The tension thickened with every passing day, and the invisible line between jealousy and bloodshed grew thinner. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter their lives in ways none of them could foresee. Daniel believed the hotel suite was their sanctuary. Every time the door closed behind them, he felt shielded from the outside world, safe within the luxury that surrounded them. For Ananya, however, the suite was no longer a refuge, but a cage where her anxieties grew louder. She had begun to notice small signs that unsettled her lingering figure near the hotel entrance. An unfamiliar car parked across the street, a call that disconnected the moment she answered. Each incident whispered the same truth. Rafiq was watching. One evening, as the city's lights shimmered against the glass windows of their suite, Daniel poured wine and spoke about the future with a kind of certainty that only someone deeply in love could have. He told her about homes they could share, the travels they would take, and the life she deserved. Ananya smiled and nodded, but her thoughts were clouded by dread. She had received a chilling message earlier that day from Rafiq, warning her that she would regret every choice she had made. It was not the first threat, but it carried a sharp finality that made her shiver. She had hidden her phone from Daniel, unwilling to burden him with the danger circling closer. Rafiq, meanwhile, had made his decision. Watching from the shadows had only stoked his fury, and he was no longer content with threats. His pride demanded action, and his obsession left him incapable of letting Ananya walk away. He began visiting contacts in the underworld, securing a weapon and plotting his approach. The hotel, with its constant flow of guests and staff, seemed an impossible place for violence. But Rafiq thrived on risk, and the thought of confronting them in Daniel's chosen sanctuary only made the plan more satisfying. As days passed, Ananya's unease became visible. Daniel noticed the way she jumped at sudden sounds, the way her laughter seemed forced, and how her gaze often lingered on the locked door. He asked if something was wrong, but she brushed it off as stress. Deep down, Daniel believed their love was enough to keep her safe. He underestimated the lengths to which jealousy and rage could drive a man like Rafiq. The night of the confrontation arrived quietly. Daniel had arranged a private dinner in the suite, complete with champagne and music. Ananya tried to mirror his joy, but her nerves betrayed her. She knew Rafiq too well to think his silence over the last 2 days meant he had given up. The stillness was dangerous, a calm before something devastating. When a knock echoed at the door, Daniel assumed it was hotel staff delivering dessert. He moved to open it with casual ease, completely unaware that the moment would unravel everything. On the other side stood Rafiq, his expression cold and unyielding, his hand hidden beneath his jacket where the weapon rested. For Ananya, time seemed to freeze. The walls of the suite, once filled with warmth and promises, now felt like the walls of a trap. Daniel's welcoming smile faltered as confusion turned to recognition, and the tension in the air thickened like smoke before fire. The sanctuary he had built for love had become the stage for violence, and there was no way back. The knock that opened the door to their nightmare echoed long after it ended. When Daniel pulled the door wide, he was met with the piercing eyes of Rafiq, a man radiating menace. The instant Daniel sensed danger, it was already too late. Rafiq pushed inside with force, shutting the door behind him. In the dim glow of the suite, his figure seemed larger than life, his rage filling every corner of the room. The air thickened with a silence, broken only by Ananya's sharp gasp. Rafiq's words were venomous, but it was his actions that carried the weight of his fury. In one swift movement, he revealed the weapon he had hidden, a blade glinting beneath the light. Daniel, unprepared and unarmed, tried to reason, but Rafiq's anger had long crossed the boundary of logic. His pride had been wounded, and for him, only blood could restore what he believed he had lost. The confrontation spiraled within seconds. Daniel attempted to protect Ananya, stepping in front of her as Rafiq advanced. Chairs toppled, glasses shattered, and the carefully arranged dinner became wreckage as the struggle consumed the room. Daniel fought with desperate strength, but Rafiq's determination was fueled by obsession. The blade found its mark, plunging deep into Daniel's body. A cry escaped him as he fell against the table, crimson spreading across the white cloth in a gruesome stain that would forever mark the suite as a place of tragedy. Ananya's screams pierced the walls, but no one came. The music Daniel had played moments earlier drowned out the chaos, masking the horror unfolding inside. She tried to pull Rafiq away, begging for mercy, but his fury was unstoppable. Each strike was a punishment, not just for Daniel, but for the betrayal Rafiq felt in every part of his being. When Daniel finally collapsed onto the floor, motionless, the room fell into an eerie stillness. The life that had once pulsed with ambition and hope was gone in a pool of blood. Rafiq turned to Ananya, his face twisted with rage and sorrow. For a moment, she believed he would kill her too, and perhaps he considered it. But instead, he hurled accusations at her, calling her unfaithful, weak, and unworthy. His eyes, however, betrayed something else, an emptiness that came with realizing that even revenge could not bring back what he believed he had lost. Without another word, he fled, leaving the suite drenched in silence and death. The discovery came hours later. Hotel staff, alerted by unanswered calls and the mess in the corridor, entered the suite to find the horrific scene. Police swarmed the building, and the story spread quickly across Dubai. A wealthy American businessman dead in a luxury hotel, his body butchered in what appeared to be a crime of passion. The scandal was irresistible to the media, who painted the tale as one of love, betrayal, and violence hidden beneath the city's glittering surface. Ananya's life unraveled in the aftermath. Investigators pried into every detail of her relationship with both men, and whispers spread that she had played them against each other. Rafiq was hunted relentlessly. His name plastered across headlines as the prime suspect in a gruesome murder that shocked 2 continents. The bloodbath in the hotel suite was no longer just a private tragedy, it was a global story. A cautionary tale of how love and obsession can ignite into deadly consequences. For Daniel, the pursuit of connection ended not in happiness, but in a violent silence. For Ananya, the future she had hoped for turned into a haunting reminder of choices that led only to loss.